Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to the podcast. It's been another hot minute. I've just got to apologise for the sporadicness of uploads lately. I had COVID and I had a baby. So today I want to share my birth story with you. Now, I know this might not be interesting to everybody. I personally just flipping love watching people's birth stories, listening to people's birth stories. I just think it's just so interesting to me, and I hope that you find mine useful and interesting and entertaining, and it is a very positive experience. So trigger warnings, if you are looking for positive birth stories, I will use the word contraction because that doesn't affect me. Some people like to use surges or waves. I'm going to use the word contraction. I'll talk about an episiotomy, and I'll talk about actively pushing as well. All right, shall we get started? Oh my goodness. So I did this for my first daughter. You can go back into the podcast, not on YouTube, Bliss and Thrive podcast, and you'll find the birth story of my first daughter in 2019, which was 100% different because I had an emergency C-section. Out of the blue, heart rate dropped, had to go in and have an emergency C. And it was a very positive experience because I still used my hypnobirthing breathing, and the outcome was my wonderful, wonderful daughter, of course. So this time round, when I knew fully that this baby in my belly wouldn't be breech, because Indy was breech, I knew I was going to fight for a natural birth. So there was a couple of things against me of why perhaps I shouldn't have gone for a natural birth. I had Strep B. I also had, obviously, the C-section from before and complications from before. So there was a little like, okay, we're going to try for a natural birth, but don't be disappointed if you have to go a different direction. So I got to 41 weeks pregnant and 2 days. So around like 38 weeks pregnant, when you start preparing for it could happen any day, you're like looking for any and every symptom of going into labor. And I kept Googling it, even though I knew the answers, because I just wanted someone to literally say, this is the day you're going to go into labor. But it didn't. So you're really like excited and hoping it's going to happen soon. But then when it got around 40 weeks, I just got this like level of acceptance of like, I knew I was never going to have an induction because all the stories of inductions that I've heard end in a C-section. And as I said, I really didn't want a C-section. And so I was like, I'm just going to let this baby just chill and sit here. I was doing like exercises to open up my pelvis to help the baby drop down. I was making sure I walked every day. And I was just making sure I enjoyed life, and enjoyed time with my daughter before there was another little one in the household. And I'm really happy that I had that kind of mindset. But to be fair, sleeping was getting pretty rubbish at that point. So it was 41 weeks pregnant. I was 41 weeks pregnant. And maybe one day, I'm going to probably mess up so many details in this because your memory just goes to crap. And we went to the beach. We were trying to go to the beach as much as possible just because that's my happy place. And it's really easy to parent our toddler on the beach because you basically just sit by the water. She runs in and out with her watering can, plays with her toys. And we got a good beach set up. We got new chairs that were comfy, etc. Anyway, went to the beach. And I was just feeling off that day. I was feeling really tired, quite grumpy. And my husband had a cold, and I was like really annoyed that he had a cold. I'd woken up at 5:30 with my daughter, and he was not feeling very well. And I was like, I was just feeling grumpy for no reason and tired. Well, not for no reason because I was over 41 weeks pregnant. But yeah, and then I was sitting there in my chair, and I was like, oh, I've peed myself. I've gone and bloody peed myself. I didn't even realise. Now, at this point in my pregnancy, I'd had COVID for a month, and that really strong COVID cough It had gone at that point, but it basically had ruined my pelvic floor. And I didn't want to do much work for strengthening it at that point because it needs to relax in pregnancy anyway. So my pelvic floor was not great. So there was like a massive possibility that I peed myself. But then I was like, no, I didn't. I was just sitting there. Why would I pee myself? So anyway, a little bit of liquid came out. And I was like, babe, I'm really tired. I think it's time to go home. But I still didn't go, oh, my waters are broken. So my waters broke on the beach. And it wasn't a gush like in the movies. It was like a little trickle, literally that like, I think I've just peed myself. But I was in my bikini. So then we had to go back to the car, and I walked across the beach, like with my beach chair on my back, like bringing my toddler along, trying to get her shoes on. And I said to my husband, like, I don't feel right. And I said, oh, my stomach was cramping, and it just intuitively felt different to a Braxton Hicks. But I couldn't tell you why it felt different, because it was still just like a little cramp. And then we stopped off at the supermarket, and I stayed in the car to get, we were just getting a few bits before we went home. And I felt that tightening in my stomach. It was like, I feel like something's happening. I said to my husband, like, I think this is the start of it. This is the start of something. So when we got home, he went from having a cold and being in, I needed to look after him mode, until he looked after me. So he got me a little plate of snacks and a cup of raspberry leaf tea. And I went to bed. I had my snacks and my tea, and then I fell asleep. I woke up and I was soaked. I was like, yeah, so excited. So my husband and my toddler were in the garden, and my bedroom window opens onto the garden. So I called them. I was like, Joanne, come here. I was like, put a towel down, because as soon as I get out of bed, I've heard that it just gushes out of you. So I literally like came out of bed, stood on the towel, and was like waiting for this gush of water. There was no gush. There was absolutely nothing. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll go put a pad in, and I'll monitor the color of the waters, etc., etc. So at this point, if you've ever had Strep B and your waters are broken, you know you should go into hospital basically as soon as your waters break, because you need antibiotics. So it's basically like a urine infection. And you need antibiotics so you don't pass on the infection to your baby. But so I'm giving birth in Spain, right? And in the public system. And some things do get lost in translation sometimes. So I was just like, okay, my waters are trickling. I'm not contracting yet. I'm not going into hospital yet. So I stayed at home and kept like leaking. I texted my friend who was coming to look after Indy, and I was like, this is happening. I don't know when, but do you want to come tonight so you don't have to like drive in the middle of the night? And my lovely friend and her husband came up, and they got there about 9:00. So my waters broke about 2:30 on the beach. And then it was like maybe 5:00 when I woke up from my nap, and they were like a lot more. And then they were just trickling out and trickling out, trickling out. I had to keep changing my pads. I really should have gave a disclaimer at the beginning of this that there's going to be gross stuff in this podcast, but who clicks on a birth story without thinking there's going to be gross stuff? So anyway, they came, and just before they came, we were watching TV, just chilling. And I was just getting like very light contractions, nothing to write home about, but they felt different to a Braxton Hicks. And then I went to the loo and I checked my pad, and it was just a little bit of like a greeny tinge. And I was like, oh shit. I showed it to my husband, and you know, all your inhibitions go out the window because he's seen a lot now. His eyes have been opened in a different way. But I showed it to my husband. I was like, what do you think? Does this look a bit greeny? He's like, yeah. So let's drive to hospital. So we packed up the car with our hospital staff. Indy was already in bed. Our friends had already arrived. It was just like perfect timing for us to go. And off we went. We went to the hospital. It was like a 25-minute drive. And we were like, maybe this is it. Or maybe they're going to send us home, or what's going to happen. And when we arrived, they're just so lovely at the hospital I chose. So if you are listening to this and you live in Mallorca, which is where I live, my first birth I did on the private healthcare insurance, but I had to end up going to the big public hospital in Palma Son Espases with my emergency. But the second time I decided I didn't want to go private healthcare because it was really disjointed. I had a really bad experience, if I'm honest. I'm not going to go into it now. didn't feel cared for at all, especially with the aftercare. So I went with the public system this time. And because I've moved to the north of the island, I went to a different hospital in Inca, and they're very pro natural birth, and the staff were A-class, flipping amazing. So I had a way better experience on the public system than I did on the private system. I know that's not going to be the same for everyone, but that's my experience. Anyway, rocked up at the hospital, and they basically told me off because they're like, Caris, you're supposed to come here and get antibiotics as soon as you started your water's breaking. I was like, whoops, sorry, I don't think I really understood that. And maybe I did know that on one level, but I had no childcare. I felt very chilled. Waters were just trickling. I was like, I'm going to stay home rather than drive all the way to the hospital with Indy and la la la. Anyway, it all worked out fine in the end. So they hooked me up to my antibiotics and I got monitored, and I couldn't really feel the contractions at this point. And they said, you have to stay in overnight so we can give you this antibiotics every 6 hours. So I was a little bit like, I wanted to labor at home, but I was also like, oh, at least we don't have to drive home and come back. And we had a nice private room. So there was another bed in there, but no one came. And it opened up onto this courtyard so you could see outside. And I had a private bathroom and everything. And I labored there overnight. So that was awesome. So they said, go into this room. If you don't call anyone, if you don't use the call button, no one will come in. They won't bother you. You do your thing. We need to get your contractions to 2 to 3 minutes apart, or when they're so intense that you can't talk anymore and they're really, really painful. And this is all done with broken Spanish and English between us both. But the gynecologist who saw me then was just so funny and awesome and just made me feel, I felt so relaxed being there. I felt so happy to be there. I felt so excited to give birth. And I was just so happy that some people were speaking English to me, because when my Spanish is a pretty crap level anyway, but I just could not recall any Spanish in this situation where my brain was trying to process going into labor. Anyway, so I set myself up in bed and I was like, I'm going to get as much sleep as possible. After about an hour of sleep, the contractions started waking me up. So I downloaded the Freya app from the Positive Birth Company, and I can 100% recommend you to download this. It's free. Basically, it's gives you positive affirmations or meditations or nice comforting stories between your contractions. And then when the contraction starts, you just click the button and she counts you through the breathing. And it's the hypnobirthing breathing of in for 4, out for 8, which was amazing. And at the beginning when I was having the contractions, I was like, they're not strong enough for me to need to breathe through them, but I wanted to practice breathing through them and I wanted to get into a rhythm. So each time I had a contraction, I'd kind of come up onto all fours in the bed. I'll be listening to counting the breathing and I'd start to do my breathing. And then I'd just lay down and try and get some rest. So they got to a point where they were about 7 minutes apart at one point. And I had to actually get out of bed and I was swaying. I found that really useful. I used to be a dancer, and that counting in for 4, out for 8 was really I felt like I could sway to the rhythm of it, and it helped me keep my rhythm of my breathing. It just gave me something to focus on. And I was really trying to focus on releasing my shoulders. I kept getting tension in my shoulders. And then it got to some point in the middle of the night and I was like, I'm so tired. Johan was sleeping. We'd already made a deal that I wasn't going to wake him up because I wanted him to have as much rest as possible to support me and also to parent Indy as well. And I didn't need him at that point. I was just in the zone. I did not need him. And then I was like, right, I'm going to try and get some sleep and get some proper rest. And I'm going to give myself, I remember saying this in my head, I'm going to give myself till I think it was 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. And then I'm going to get up and get this going. So I went back to bed and I tried to rest as much as possible. And at this point, my contractions went to 20 minutes apart. So I got 20 minutes of sleep, because before I was just getting just dropping off and then a contraction would come. So I don't know how I managed to slow them down, whether they were just going to slow down naturally anyway, but I feel like I made a decision to slow them down. So I was like, I need some sleep. Otherwise I'm not going to be able to do this. So I gave myself a couple of hours of longer breaks between contractions and getting a little bit of shut-eye between each one. And they were getting more intense, the actual contractions, but there were still these long breaks. And then when it was whatever time, 6 or 7. I was like, right, I woke up Johan. I said, we're going to get this going now. I've been contracting all night. And I was like, are you proud of me? And he was like, I'm just tired because I've been sleeping in a chair. And so we put our music on, we brought our speaker with us. I kept the lights nice and low. I went and had a hot shower. I had a couple of contractions in the shower, which just felt nice, like to change it up. And I asked for the ball. So I got an exercise ball. So I was like bouncing on that. And then between contractions, I could lay my head on the bed. I can insert a picture here actually and just rest. And I was ready to get this ramped up. So I was really trying to like bounce on the ball, maybe get a little bit of rest, but actively do something. And then I did some exercises to open up my pelvis because I was like, okay, these contractions are still quite far apart. I know they need to be like 3 minutes apart to get going. I'm like, I want to get this going. So I did some deep squats and I did like some leg swing movements and some opening up of the top of my pelvis, so this baby can come down. And from doing that, it went insane. It literally ramped up like that. So at this point, I didn't have the app in. I was just counting my own breathing. And in hindsight, I wish I'd kept the app in my ears so she could count my breathing, because counting my own breathing became difficult next because I puked. I was really violently sick and the contractions ramped up like night and day. But just to keep it on the positive front, like you can handle it because you can breathe and your body can handle it. And if you've been doing hypnobirthing, then those kind of affirmations like every surge brings me closer to my baby, no surge lasts longer than 1 minute, just like ride the wave, like all of those things really, really help. But when I puked, I lost my breath. So I lost my breathing and I was like, Johan, help me. And he couldn't remember which breathing technique to tell me. So he was telling me the wrong breathing technique. And I was like, that's the wrong one. But I could barely speak. TMI, but I also had diarrhea at this point as well. So contracting, puking, running to the toilet, saying, Johan, please help me. And so that was my first taste of, I think I was transitioning now and this was a real deal happening. So we called the nurses and we're like, can we come up to the labor ward, please? Because this is getting real. And they were actually coming to get me anyway, to check on me because they were doing a shift change and they were going to come and get me anyway. They wanted me to sit in the wheelchair to be taken to the labor ward. I did not want to sit down. I could not contract sitting down in that wheelchair. And for me, I was just like, I don't want to sit down. I want to be moving. I want to be moving this baby down. I wanted to walk there, but I sat in the chair. So I think I had one contraction outside the room and then one on the way and then one as soon as I got to the labor ward. So they were definitely closer. And when I got there, they wanted to monitor me and she put the monitors on me and I was standing up, I think, and I had a contraction. She was like, can you sit/lay on these super comfy chairs that they have? She reclined me back and she said, can you go over onto your left side? And she was like, okay, that's better. Your baby wants you to be in this position. Its heart rate is better when you're in this position. So I was like, I'm basically sitting and laying in a chair. Like my whole thing was I wanted to be super active during my pregnancy, during my labor. And I was really enjoying like swaying with my contractions. And I couldn't do that now. And then the puking started again massively. Johan grabbed like a trash can or a bucket or something from the room. And as he brought it forward, I brought my head forward and smacked me in the face. I remember like smacked my lip and I was like, oh my God, I feel like my lip's bleeding. On top of this, contracting is intense. It's so intense, but it's a feeling like you've never had before. And I don't want to use much negative language here, but in case you're listening to this for a positive birth story, but it's so positive. The experience is so positive. Don't be scared because you can flip and do it. It's all in the mind. So, but I want to keep it real as well, you know? Anyway, smacked in the face with a sick bucket. These contractions were so intense. And now, all of a sudden, from like 20 minutes between contractions, I had no break between contractions. I was having back-to-back contractions because this one was really intense. I remember being sick, puking in the bucket and thinking, it'll be over. Like it can only last a minute. And then I was like, it's still going. And Johan said on the monitor, he could see that I had a contraction and then it just went right into another one. And the nurse, I had a wonderful midwife there Elena, like my angel midwife, she was like, when you are in between contractions, we need to get you up so we can go and examine you, see where you're at, and get you prepped for labor. And I was like, I couldn't talk. And I was like, what do you mean in between contractions? Like, this is constant. I remember thinking that. And it's so funny when during this whole situation, you have two brains going. You have the system of your body, which is just doing what it's doing, and it's totally on autopilot. And then you have your like thinking brain, which is like analytically going through stuff and thinking other thoughts. And it feels like you're looking down on yourself. It's very bizarre. So I had two things happening at once. And I remember thinking like, number one, are you expecting me to answer you back because I can't talk? And number two, are you expecting me to move because I can't move? Anyway, somehow I managed to have a break in contraction so I could get from one room to the other to get examined. And I was 7 centimeters dilated. And for me, I was so happy at that point. I was so happy. Had some more contractions in that room, peed on the floor. Oh my God. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I've peed on the floor. And she's like, you're in labor. It's fine. Like, there's going to be a lot more stuff coming out of there. But my contractions were so strong. And what I really loved doing at that point was holding on around Johan's neck and like hanging off him and swaying. I went to the toilet because I did need to pee, and the midwife then came in and I did a contraction with her hugging me and swaying. And I just remember thinking, you smell so nice and you're so beautiful and you're so kind. Like, I was just in love with this midwife, I think. Anyway, then they were like, okay, I told them I wanted the pool. Yeah, when I was getting hooked up to the monitors, I was like, I need something for the pain. And I really wanted to use the pool, but I don't think they had it in my notes. So I was like, can you get the pool ready for me, please? And she was like, I saw her little face light up. She's like, the pool? Yeah, amazing. But because I had this strep, she had to go check with the gynecologist. And in the end, they said it was fine. So they were filling up the pool for me. And when they were filling up the pool, I was like, can I have an epidural? Because everybody says there's one point in your labor where you feel like you can't do it. And this was my point. And I was just like, I said to Johan, I was like, I can't do it. And he's like, babe, you are doing it. And that's something we actually discussed before. So I discussed with Johan like different things that I might say, because I'd watch a lot of birth stories, and different things he could say to me to help me. And that was one of the things I was like, I feel like a lot of people say they can't do it and their husbands say, but you're doing it. And that kind of helps them. But in the moment, he was like, yeah, but Carrie, you're doing it. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to do it. But I did really, because then the midwife was like, look, do you want an epidural or do you want the water? And I was like, I want the water. I knew what I wanted. You're just like desperate for some relief at that point. I think I'd lost control a little bit, if I'm completely honest. I'd lost control of my breathing because I was puking, and my mind had gone a little bit. But I did manage to keep pulling it back. But I think the allure of being able to possibly have an epidural, I don't actually think that's a good idea, because it takes your focus away. If I knew that just wasn't an option, I'd feel a lot more focused. That's just thinking in hindsight now. But anyway, so then it was like, okay, we're going to try and move from this examination room across to where the pool is. Now, that was not very long at all. And then when she hooked me up to the monitor, like the ones that go on while you're in the pool, she was like, the baby is super low. The baby is just dropped. Like a minute ago, it was up here and now it's right down here. So let's get you in the pool. They had to put my cannula back in because it had fallen out when I got my pajamas off. And I remember them being like, do you have like a bra or something to cover up your boobs? And I was like, no, and I don't care. I am going to be naked, and it's literally like the least of my worries. I do not care who sees my boobs. So then it was time to get in the pool, and I have this lovely memory, this lovely moment of holding on to Johan's hand and holding on to the midwife's hand as you like climb the steps into the pool. So you don't like hop over the side like you would in a bath. You like climb the steps and then you come down. So I had each of their hands and I was completely naked, big belly, big boobs, contracting, just like in this, like, you feel like you're in like a druggy haze because of all the hormones, the oxytocin, and at this point the adrenaline starts to come in, and because of all the breathing, just like loads of oxygen as well. But so I was holding their hands and I was climbing up these steps, and in my head it's like almost in slow motion, and I felt like a goddess. I felt like some kind of Greek god descending into the pool to give birth. That's what I felt like. I was so high up in the room, and them holding my hands. It's quite a funny image in my head, but that's what I felt like. So as I was like descending the steps into the pool, and I think I was just holding Johan's hand at this point, they were looking at the monitor, and my midwife said, "Hey, Karis, do you feel like you want to push?" And I was like, yeah, because as I was walking into the pool, I felt this enormous pressure, which literally feels like you have like the moon or a bowling ball between your legs, like in your vagina and in your butt. It feels like a baby's head is about to come out, basically. And I was like, yeah, this, I could feel the baby there. And I felt like she was already half out. It was really bizarre. And it happened so fast because in my hypnobirthing, I'd learned like you would feel the baby like descend and then go up a little bit and descend and go up a little bit. But all I could feel was all of a sudden the baby's head was pushing on my vagina and bum. And she was right there. And they said, you can lean back here if you want. And there's like a place you can lean back and put your head. I tried to lean back there and I was like, no, this is super awkward. I feel so wrong. So I got up into my kneeling position. I was holding around Johan's neck and he was like leaning over the pool and I was pulling down his neck and it just popped into my head. I remembered from, oh my God, I can't even remember her name. But basically, knees in, calves out, Kiko position. It opens up the base of your pelvis to be able to let your baby come out. So I remember kneeling in the pool and I had my legs fairly close together. I'm not someone who's like spreading my legs naturally. But then I remembered, all right, knees in, calves out to open up the base of my pelvis so that I could push this baby out. And I was pulling on Johan and the noises that came out of me at this point, I said to Johan, like, if I start making loads of noise during the pushing phase, tell me to be quiet, go inwards, focus my energy down and in. And my second half of the brain was telling me that, but I couldn't help making these guttural, roaring, mooing, animalistic, insane noises. And at this point, I think I was also in a little bit of shock because I felt like I'd just come down to the labor ward. And it was like, okay, I was puking and contracting. I was 7 centimeters dilated. I got in the pool and now I'm pushing. I thought I was going to continue to labor in the pool. We brought our little lights down and our music down. And this was just like, no, it's time. You literally got in the pool and it was time to push. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have the baby in the pool. I remember thinking that. And then I remember thinking, I'm probably absolutely killing Johan's back and legs because he was like bent over the pool forwards. And so in between like pushing contractions, I gave him a break and he was like, yeah, I felt like my hamstrings were about to snap, which is just hilarious. And then I grabbed him again because I was like, I need to hold on to you. I remember just like smelling him. He's my favorite smell. So I remember just like smelling him and just, feeling like, oh my God, we're doing this. And there was just this deep, guttural, moaning, roaring, animalistic thing. I think I did like 2 pushes in the pool. And then they said, Karis, you need to come out the pool and get on the bed. I did not question them. I didn't ask why. I just did what they told me to do. So I think I did about 2 pushes in the pool, like 2 contractions of pushes in the pool, or maybe it was more, I'm not sure. And then they said, Karis, you have got to get out and come on the bed. And I didn't question them. I didn't think anything. I just got up and I just went. And as I was walking over there, I was like, oh my God, this head. I'm climbing out the pool, holding onto Johan's hand. And I was like, the head feels like it's coming, it's there. And I'm like walking along with it. And I got onto the bed and they said to me, your baby's heart rate is dropping. So we've got to get her out now. We need to push. And then I was in a situation where I was like, I did not want to give birth laying on my back. I know all the anatomy of the pelvis, everything. I was like, this is the worst position to give birth in, but they needed me there because she had to in the end give me an episiotomy. And the baby's health is the most important thing. This is what happened with Indy as well with the C-section. You let go of like all your, but I wanted this magical, mystical hypnobirthing experience. And you're like, I just want to meet my baby and get her out. Like, let's do this. What do you need me to do? I'll do it. I'll comply. I'll do it. And, I was on my back. I had my legs up, but I was doing it and I felt still really in control. At this point, guys, I'd had zero pain relief, no gas and air, no paracetamol, no TENS machine. I literally had about 3 minutes in the water. I didn't even mention that when I stepped into that water, it didn't feel like water. It felt like a magical elixir. It felt amazing. So if you have the opportunity to have a water birth, even if it's just to do your contractions in the water, like in hindsight, I wish I'd come down earlier so I could have got in the pool earlier. It feels so good. And I can imagine that it would have been really nice to do more contractions in there and perhaps potentially give birth in there. But that's not my story. And I'm so fine with that. And I was mentally prepared for anything. So I'm just happy that I got to be in the pool and I got to actually have a pain-free VBAC. I got to have a vaginal birth after a C-section. Anyway, I digress. Let me continue with the story. So I'm laying on the bed and they're like, Karis, you got to push. And this was the weirdest thing at this point because it's quite abstract, pushing. And I hadn't prepared for that because I'd prepared for letting my body push the baby out rather than me actively pushing. But in this case, I didn't have time for that. This baby had to come out. So I did have to actively push. And it's weird, especially laying on your back. It's just a weird position to push from. You don't feel like you've got any like power from anywhere. And I'd like researched all different positions to push from and things I wanted to do, but there just wasn't time for any of that. It just had to happen this way. And the lovely midwife, the one who had been with me throughout, she was like, I hate to do this and I never like to do this, but I'm going to have to give you a little cut. We need to get this baby out. And because it happened so quick, I think I hadn't had time to like open up properly. I was like, then but I've had no pain relief. That's my thought. I was like, oh my God, but I've had no pain relief. And she was like, you've just gone through so much with no pain relief. You can do this. You won't even feel it. And it's true. It was like the tiniest little sting. And to be honest, you're just so focused on getting your baby out. You're fine. So I pushed and they were like, the head's out. And I was like, they're lying to me because the head can't be out. I don't know. I thought like, they're just telling me that to just encourage me. Why they would do that. Johan saw the head came out. And then I think it was 1 or 2 more pushes. And then you just feel the most easy, just slopping out. That's so gross. But she just slithered out of me like a little slimy alien. And then just felt like that she just plopped on my chest. And I was like, I did it. I pushed a baby out with no pain relief with like, the situation just took its path. Like you have to sit back and just let the birth go the way it goes and not try to control it because you don't have a chance of controlling it. Like it just happened. And I had a wonderful team and my wonderful husband and I had the tools of the hypnobirthing, which if you haven't checked it out, like go read a hypnobirthing book, go check out the Positive Birth Company, the Naked Doula on Instagram. I'll link all these things below. Like, just to feel empowered enough to be like, I don't feel like I actually need pain relief because I've seen so many people do this without pain relief. And I know the techniques of how to get through the pain. And like, I'm pretty good with my mindset, so I can control my mind quite well. But even I lost it a little bit. So empowering. I felt like a lioness, goddess, this kind of primal animalistic creature that was just doing exactly what my body was made to do. And this little dark-haired baby, my first child has got like white blonde hair. So this little dark-haired baby came up on me all slippy and crying. She literally latched on the boob almost straight away. And it was just an amazing experience. the coolest experience. And I'm so glad that was my experience. And I'm so glad that she was healthy. And I'm so glad that the team spotted what was happening and got me out the pool. And I'm so glad I just listened and complied. And I'm so glad I had all of those tips and tricks and tools behind me. And I basically had the birth that I dreamed of. Like, the only thing, of course, I would have liked to have not had her heart rate drop at the end. But, you know, you can't control those things. She came down so fast. She came down like a rocket. She was a bit distressed. They said, when I went to see my midwife the other day, he said in my notes, it said there was quite a lot of meconium that came out behind her. So she was distressed. Meconium is their first poo. And if they do that inside you, it means they are, distressed. So I needed to get her out, and she was ready to come. She'd been in there for 41 weeks and 2 days. So out she came into the world, and now she's 2.5 weeks old. I'll get my husband who edits this to maybe put some little pictures in of her because she's so cute. She's napping right now, and it's just bloody wonderful, basically. And I feel so empowered, and I feel so good, and the vagina's healing, and the breastfeeding's going well, and yeah, we're tired, but it's just an incredible experience. So that's my birth story. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too long-winded. And I realize I'm sitting at my desk while I'm recording this, and it feels very formal, but this is just always where we record the podcast, and it was just much easier to sit here. And little nugget for you: I'm not wearing any trousers while I record this. I've only put clothes on my top half because it's really, really hot here in Mallorca. But yes, hopefully now I can get in a swing of the podcast. Jovie is her name, Jovie Rae. She's taking amazingly long 2 to 3 hour naps in her cot. It's great. It's great being a second time mum because you're like, I'm going to do this next time. And I know each baby's different, but so yeah, I have time to record podcasts. So podcast is back, and we are actually going to go through a bit of a rebrand. I've got an idea. So it's going to have a bit of a rebrand and a bit of a reboost. I always feel like you have these phases in your life, and it's like, it happened after I had my first daughter as well. And it's like you kind of wrap up one thing and like move into another, but I'm still going to be podcasting because it's like one of my favorite things to do. We're just going to have a rebrand and a little refocus. But I'll tell you more about that later. But I hope you enjoyed. Please share this with anyone who needs to hear an empowering birth story. I think it's pretty rare to hear that every single thing went positively in a birth story. It's lovely to watch those as well. But I think these are important too, just to open your eyes to like different things happen and it's still really positive and empowering. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye.